I'd like to answer this.
Go ahead.
That's a great question. And you know, in spite of the sort of vehemence, and I have a feeling that Mark ultimately goes this way. I won't speak for him, but in spite of the vehemence of the arguments, I actually think that both sides are necessary. You know, they're flip sides of the same coin, and in that tension, we will find the balance. And my concern really has been, like, in a way, my dad's an old style conservative. You know, he was a conservative right up to this last election when he turned around and voted for Obama. And we used to have these arguments all the time. And I never, you know, I always felt like, you know, he had really good points, and I think that I had really good points, and I think that in the overall cosmology of things, the overall, like, the way the world works, that balance that the right and the left will find will be just right. I really believe that, and that both sides are necessary. I wouldn't want to live in a world that didn't have the right wing in it. I think it's necessary.
Well, you know, there's a funny thing about the middle. There is a political current right now in the United States, the no-label movement. And it tends to be formed out of disaffected Democrats. Michael Bloomberg in New York is part of the key to that. The trouble is that the extreme middle can be just as blinkered as the right and the left. Because you're in the middle doesn't mean you're necessarily any closer to the truth. It just might mean that you're running along that yellow line in the road. What moves us forward is sometimes the institution of a full program rather than half of a program. There are moments that come, and so you have to really appreciate that. I'm making the case that this is a non-dual moment for the contradiction between progress and return. What I'm saying is that for progress to take place now, we need to return to the fundamental values. That those two things in this moment coincide and are non-dual. If another road is taken, then I think we will be in deep doo-doo. So that's my partial answer to that. It's a more elaborate thing, and I think it'll be an ongoing dialogue between us.
And just for the record, it wasn't so much directed at you two. I actually thought this was a very fair debate, and I've really been interested. I'm more talking about the extremes in the world, the differing ideologies that often get us into violent situations and wars, ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't think you could beat the newly minted citizen with the British accent.
No,
That's a great argument. We have arrived. This is closing arguments. Perhaps for symmetry's sake, Arthur can start and then Margaret.
Oh, you know what? So, Arthur, so take the time you want, and then whatever that time is, then I'll take that amount. So you can just do what you need.
I mean, Marvin, you started with a great movie moment. I'd like to end with a great movie moment. I think what I'm afraid of in terms of the extremes of the right wing and where they would go if it was unchecked would be Pottersville in This American Life. It's a Wonderful Life. And you know, if you remember that movie, essentially, as we look back on what the town would have been like without George, you know, it was a horrible place. It was overrun. It was, you know, dirty. It was polluted. It was. I mean, that movie. It's an old classic, but it's really, to me, kind of a horror about where we can end up if we don't check the excesses of the far right. And I just sort of, I mean, to me, the Buddha said, health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth. And I think that philosophically and spiritually, the kind of affluenza that we face, the endless desire for more, is destroying our planet environmentally and destroying us economically and spiritually. So I think that we need some checks and balances on that. And like I said a moment ago, I think that the right wing unchecked would lead us to Pottersville. I don't know what progressivism would lead us to. It may lead us here, it may not. Marvin thinks it would lead us to a kind of a totalitarianism. Maybe he's right. I think that both impulses are necessary, and both sides have a useful function in this dialogue. But I basically, I see progressivism as not the dominant conversation in America right now. I mean, the dominant conversation and what's happened over the last 30 years has been all about the right wing and what the right wing wants. And what the right wing wants is, it seems to come down to, you know, cut my taxes, and, you know, I've got mine, so forget about you. And I think that in America, that we really do much better if we kind of bound each other together and looked out for that person that didn't have the advantages that we had, that didn't have it growing up. And that maybe perhaps we can take these people, these 1.5 million children that are homeless, not even just living in poverty, but actually homeless, and do something about that, so that they don't grow up and become, number one, a burden on the system. So that's a little enlightened self-interest on our part. But number two, just the actual moral idea that we want to give these kids the opportunity to fulfill their greatest potential. And I think that's, I mean, I love that idea of the neoliberal movement, but I think that progressivism now, that's what the focus is, on what works and how do we provide that opportunity for all. Thank you.
I hope there'll be an opportunity to do further conversations. We did not get into Libya and the Middle East, which is in flames. Very important questions. There was no time to properly respond around global warming. My own view is that the only reasonable position to take on that is agnostic. And the only reasonable position to take on the measures to deal with it, even if it is true or humbug. But we haven't had a chance to get into all of that, and I would love to. It's a study, that's a question I've studied both of these quite a bit. Foreign policy was a specialty of mine. So there's much to explore. We just scratched the surface on a number of things. I want you to think just for a moment here of a chessboard. And there are all these pieces on the chessboard. And the players who are above the chessboard move these chess pieces. And they begin to feel that if they can figure out how to move them properly and get them into the right position, why then consciousness will automatically arise from that, and we'll have a fairer, more equal, better society. But what they're not realizing is that every single one of these chess pieces has its own consciousness. And it likes to move in the direction it likes to move when it likes to move. And there has been developed in human history, organically, an invention far superior to the wheel that enables this to manifest itself. And that invention is the market. The market is the singular greatest invention of the human species, well beyond the wheel. Because what the market does is it means that millions upon millions of individual decisions, individually realized and felt, with people moving to meet their own self-interest, end up generating civilization, science, culture, creativity, and this extraordinary circumstance that we have today. So the conservative is interested in preserving this market, not in distorting it, not in twisting it, not in making it develop into an outcome that would be, quote unquote, more palatable or pleasing. So I think I'll end on a movie as well. Remember The Grapes of Wrath? Well, there's a great scene in The Grapes of Wrath where the Joad family has left Oklahoma, and Grandpa dies. And they're going to bury Grandpa. And they do it near the campsite. And Tom, that's the Henry Fonda character, is explaining to people, he wants to put a note in the bottle to go with Grandpa. The reason he does this is he says, you know, there's some working fellas out there, and now and then they'll dig up a body, and they dig up that body, and they figure that someone done killed them. And you know something? The government is more interested in a dead man than it is in a live one. And at that point, all the liberal hearts soar, because they say, yes, we want the government to be concerned with that live one. And what I want to say to you tonight is I want it the other way around. When I'm dead, I want them to get the yellow tape out. I want them to surround the place. I want them to show me I want them to show those who survived me that there's been no foul play. I want to know exactly in the autopsy why it was that I died. But while I'm living, I want to see them, I want to see the government as little as possible. I want them in my life as little as possible. And you know what I think? That you do too.